So we have an understanding of how these names, towns and buildings, are connected through the AI. There is a reoccurring fire theme. There are all these strange patterns, where we have hours and hours of documented evidence of this. We focus on the old world here, and the previous civilization, and the hidden coded messages within these false narratives, and it all translates into today's world. 100%. We know that the airports are so strange, and in my opinion, especially the big ones, they were previously there, and we have added on to them. We know that the Denver airport is strange in itself, said to have many buildings that are under the ground. And when we look at the O'Hare International Airport, and we have its location, and see the address, we find something very strange. Again, coded messages, even in addresses, for airports. Here we go. We see 10000 Bessie Coleman Drive, Chicago, Illinois, with a zip code of 60666. We have a lot of interesting things to look into today, including giants. We visited the mounds, which is clearly a massive pyramid, right next to St. Louis. We have boots on the ground footage in episode 45, and I thought that we covered the best parts of that story, until I found this article, titled The Mounds Complex, Ancient Open Air University of North America, for teaching navigation and cyclic astronomy. Here we go. We scroll down and find this paragraph. In the 1880s, archaeologists went into the site and found a vast amount of skeletal evidence in the mounds, sometimes in deep chambers, far from the surface. They found very large individuals, achieving heights of 7 to 8 feet in stature. In a few instances, the skeletons had 6 fingers, 6 toes, and double rows of teeth. Where hair was still present, it was often red or blonde in color. All right, interesting. I don't remember being taught of the 6-fingered giants. Well, let's keep going. Here in the very next paragraph, I think we find which group is being controlled and being told to hide this information from us. I look at this group as a front. I think they're being told to do this by the hidden group, but let's see what happened here. And you, of course, can decide for yourself. John Wesley Powell lived with the Indians, and of course, became the first director of the U.S. Bureau of Ethnology at the Smithsonian Institute. Powell started deciding what we were going to learn, deciding that the Indians were the only people who had ever been in the Americas prior to Columbus. So, he tells us that the Indians were responsible for the Cahokia Mounds. Very interesting. And also, Columbus, in my opinion, was not a real character, and just another story where if you think he was good or bad, you are admitting that he was real, when in reality, he's a fictional character to attempt to set up their ridiculous timeline. Are you ready to go even deeper? We have fully documented, reliable accounts of the Smithsonian Institute personnel traveling to the 1800s communities in Middle America to take possession of large skeletons exhumed from the mounds, where they have this information documented in papers. Then we have Patricia Mason of Ohio reaching out to the Smithsonian Institute for more information to try to find these giant skeletons that were somehow gifted to this museum, or you could call it a burn pit, because they told Patricia that the Smithsonian Institute never received any of these items. So we clearly have an operation here. We are starting to see who is doing what. We are seeing key players in the game, and who is attempting to hide our past from us. At this point, there were 100% giants in my opinion. The doors that we've seen here are massive. They aren't for us. Buildings are way too big. They aren't proportionate to our size at all. And when you find this article from 1891, where it states that the old Catholic temple erected at 120 years ago in 1771, which was 5 years before the USA was even found. It was abandoned as a church. The old temple has an interesting history. Well, I'm sure it does. A temple in from 1771. And wait, what did they say was 24 inches under the dirt at from episode 45? What appeared to be the outline of the temple. Was this temple and these giant bones here so much closer to our timeline than we are told, covered up by dirt at some point after 1891. They could be talking about another temple, located in the same town of. But how many temples does one small town have in 1771? This is all very strange. Either this is the temple, and it was built in 1771, and this was common knowledge, possibly by giants, or was filled with temples. It's very interesting stuff. How many temples does your town have? In 1771, I guess they just had a bunch of temples all over the place. What is going on here? Especially when St. Clair County, the county that is located in, wasn't even found until April 27th, 1790, which is like 20 years after they say this temple was built. The mainstream history is a complete mess at this point. It isn't logical at all. The truth is smooth. It makes sense. There aren't holes in the truth. A lie is a mess and all over the place. And this is exactly why we fully trust the mainstream narrative. Oh wait, we don't? Now in Columbus, Ohio, we are given one of the most important narratives to this point, to our research, in my opinion. We have the Pontifical College, Josephinum, where Joseph comes over to the USA from Germany in 1867. 3 years later, he becomes a priest and has his own church within a few months. And he gets to buy the house next door, of course, to support 12 orphans. And do we all know about the orphans at this point? Possibly a repopulation tactic that was going on in the 1800s. It's very interesting. Was it only 12 orphans? Or was this one of the places that they would send the orphans through to get them into society? Because who would ever question Joseph the priest from the 1800s? You know, the guy that just randomly shows up from Germany, has all the money ready to buy houses somehow, to support orphans. It all checks out, of course. Simple stuff for Joseph. This was known as the St. Joseph Orphan Asylum. It grew so rapidly, for some weird and of course very random reason, that 5 years after it began, Joseph moved the operation closer to the railroad, which is how these individuals would be dispersed throughout the country. So this is a paragraph of admission. We are being told, down to the smallest detail, how this operation worked. It would go through churches. They would bring a manager type over from Europe, call them a priest, give them a house, give them the resources to run these operations, purchasing new buildings with ease to run the program. So not only do you have the World's Fairs that were a repopulation tactic, you had these orphan trains and orphan hubs where they would be dropped off and planted into society. The new facility that Joseph was just finding and saying was his. I want to make that clear, he wasn't building anything. He was given these buildings that were already there from the previous civilization. So the new building gave the orphans a training in the trades. So this Joseph guy was obviously sent with a purpose, to repopulate and teach to a brand new society, one that didn't have any skills. This right here is how you reset a society's technology level. The teacher is never in charge of what the students learn. This Joseph character is a teacher of a class. He is not the principal of the school. There are many schools. He is clearly taking direction as to what the students of the new society will learn. There were many classes like this one all over the country, happening simultaneously. This was an operation. This went on for 12 years with zero backstory. Finds the Collegium Josephinum, this massive college, is just found and ready to roll. No clue where the money came from. No mention of how many men were needed to build this place. Just found it. And its first class of 23 men began. It's unbelievable. This is one of the most important stories to our research, in my opinion, because it shows exactly how the operation took place. It's actually laying it all out there and shows us exactly how they repopulated these regions in the USA. It shows us the operation with the orphans, the teaching programs. And this was our base for our technological knowledge. Whoever controlled this operation from the top has all of the technology from the previous civilization and is controlling what technology we get to have. And they've clearly been doing this for a very long time. And for anyone that's on the fence, we have the St. Vincent's Infant Asylum, located in Baltimore, where we have tunnels under the ground. This infant asylum was in use in the mid-1800s, during the same time period as German transferred Joseph And what do you know? In the early 1900s, the operation was done. And they declined new orphans. 1941, they changed this to apartments. And in 2015, they light it up and try to destroy it with a fire. But they fail. So 3 years later, what do you think happens? 2018, the building was illegally demolished without a permit. You literally can't make this stuff up. It gets more and more obvious if you're still on the fence. Let's go even deeper. We have the St. Mary's Orphan Asylum, located in Galveston, Texas, where they tell us that this one is haunted. Now, I've talked about hauntings before briefly. I'm not going to say that there aren't any hauntings, but when it comes to these old world buildings, I think it was a tactic to keep people away from them. Just say that they're haunted, and it scares everyone away from investigating. So we have yet again another orphan operation going on in the mid-1800s. And I'm just gonna let you know that this is going on and on and on. There were so many orphan operations going on in the mid-1800s because this was how they were repopulating these cities. So where were all these kids' parents? Is this where a lot of our families originated from? We are told hundreds of fire stories. We know that that is the key and the nod, that it's a building that was constructed by the previous civilization. The St. Mary's Orphan Asylum. For anyone wondering where the parents of these orphans were, you might want to check the other asylum, the insane asylum, because they were not going along with the reset. Here's a graph showing that the insane asylums are disappearing over time, and I wonder why. Good thing they cared so much about us in 1955 and 1965, because surely that was the fix. And then a fire had devastated the St. Mary's Orphan Asylum in 1875. If anyone is still on the fence, there is room over here to get off the fence. And honestly, who would want to sit on top of a fence anyway? So we have Ohio, Baltimore, Texas. We have all these towns and cities being repopulated. Brand new people, brand new social structures, brand new mindsets, and resetting what people are taught. This all happened around 150 years ago. So this is all very new. This isn't thousands of years ago. Then we have another very interesting aspect of this in Germany during the same exact time period. And remember, we also have good old Joseph from earlier, also from Germany. So here we are given the Kinder Bewahrenstalt. And if I pronounce that wrong, I hope you all understand. This is where we are given kindergarten, another tactic to teach children the brand new social structures. What better way to trick people? Take them out of their family's home and tell them what to think, and then test them on it. Failing the test will then lower your self-esteem, putting a social pressure on children to agree with this new way of thought, or they will be called dumb and get an F. This is an operation. It's all connected, and it's designed to enslave the world's population. Year after year, we are all taught a false narrative. We've all been brainwashed into thinking that you are either smart or dumb based on a curriculum that holds zero value in the real world. Now, who knows if this Frederick Froebel was even a real character, but they do admit that kindergarten starts in Germany around the exact same time period that we're talking about, the mid-1800s. So I wanted to tie it all in with the rest of the world. This is a worldwide operation. This is not just the USA. We have a lot of things in the USA being controlled through Germany during this time period, especially the education aspect of it. And I want to point out that yes, we have borders and division now. We have so many countries in the world, and everyone is separated. And you're unable to travel to other lands unless you have a piece of paper that is registered and checked at the checkpoints. But who's to say that there even was a border in the previous civilization? Were there so-called elected leaders controlling everyone, deciding what we can and cannot do? Could they have had a truly free life where they were able to travel wherever they want freely and not feel like they're invading someone else's territory? I would say, in my opinion, this was the world that was here before the reset. And something happened where this past civilization was wiped out and their technology was stolen by a group. And some of it is now being sold back to us strategically. The good stuff is kept to control the masses and used for their benefit. Here we have the St. Joseph's Orphanage, located in Vermont. And if you want to know where they get these horror movies, where they show a nun doing crazy things, there's a dark truth to it. These movies don't come out of nowhere. They come from the last 150 years. here in Vermont in the mid-1800s again. Thousands of children came through its doors. If you want to demoralize, control, and manipulate a new population, make them completely forget their past and never question what they're told, you would make them suffer. You would take them from their families, and you would ruin their mind at a young age. This is exactly what happened in the wars, where all men between ages 21 to 45 were required to fight in World War I, which was in 1914 to 1919. 2.8 million men drafted, 2 million volunteered, where you get the term shell-shocked or mentally confused. But talk about destroying minds and making sure that the population is unable to focus on finding the truth. So we have millions of people in wars. We have more than 5 million American children passing through the orphanage system in the 1900s alone, hitting its peak in the early 1900s. So it began in the mid-1800s and really ramped up to populate these cities. The American orphanage system included more than 1,600 institutions, partly supported by public funding, but usually run by religious orders, exactly like we talked about in the beginning of this episode. So I think we have now a very solid understanding how the USA was repopulated, how this operation took place, and exactly when it took place. I think that we now have factual evidence as to when this reset really happened. And I think that every episode that is released makes episode 10 and 38 stronger and stronger, giving us more and more proof to our true history. I promise that I have something that will take the mainstream history that we have been force-fed since day one and rip it right in half. So here we go. The photo description states that in the summer of 1903, construction continues inside the entrance to the Palace of Machinery for the Louisiana Purchase Exposition, the 1904 World's Fair. The date of this photo is in 1903. The fair in St. Louis was in 1904. So this would all make perfect sense, except there's a massive flaw. A flaw so big that it's undeniable proof that this building was constructed 100 years before the 1903 date that we are told, and proof that there was a mud flood that ripped through this building at some point after 1803. Where is the foundation of this building? Incredibly detailed construction projects do not take place on top of dirt and garbage. This, in my opinion, is the most incredible photo that I have ever seen to this point. A lie right in our faces, saying that this was being built in 1903, when we have multiple dates of 1803 time-stamped right on the building. Multiple times. Not only that, but you can see that the mud flood damaged the bottom of this building here. The mud came after the construction, not before. And I want to make that point very clear. This is a cleanup project, 100%. After this World's Fair, they knocked these buildings down, not because they were pathetic, but because they held dates that do not fit in our mainstream timeline and architecture that we cannot reproduce today. It's incredible. I've been talking to many people, engineers, construction workers, architects, and more about this photo. They are telling me that this is undeniable proof. And at this point, there isn't an excuse in the book that could save the mainstream history. It's time for everyone to wake up to the nonsense that we have all been force-fed to believe. There are a lot of hidden photos that I'm about to share, and they no longer have to be buried deep in the archives. And for the beginning of these photos, I want to focus on the main theme. The theme being that the building is completed, and they are simply putting scaffolding around the buildings. In my opinion, they are painting these buildings white so that they look brand new, when in reality, they are old and from the past civilization. Here we are told is the government building in the Philippine Exposition. We can zoom in on these guys, and of course they're not doing anything productive. You would think that they could build a better ladder compared to what they supposedly built right next to them. And again, let's switch over to this one, where we are told that this is a construction photo when it's clearly completed. The only construction going on here is the scaffolding. Again and again, people just standing there looking so odd. And it almost looks like they just have a kid here. I mean, look at the detail on top of the columns. It's unbelievable. And I believe that I was correct when I said that they were just painting these buildings. They are not constructing anything. Now let's look down here at the bottom right hand side of this photo. It says right here that these are painters and decorators. They are not building anything like the description says for these photos. And they needed a place to live on site because they were painting all of these old world buildings. They were going to be there for a while. The buildings lasted forever. The paint did not. So they needed to get a fresh coat of paint on there. But when you look at the description of the photo, it says that it's a photo during its construction. So they are clearly lying. Painting is not constructing. It's painting. Two different, completely separate jobs. So these are all from the St. Louis World's Fair that we showed in the intro. The dates are from 1803, not 1903. And it had a mud flood that ripped through the interior of these buildings. So let's take a look at this building from St. Louis. And this is founded and renamed the Varied Industries Building. This is another completion photo that they're trying to say is a construction photo. And I want to zoom in on the top of this building. Can you believe the tech that is on the top of this thing? It's incredible. We have shown the airships in episode 48 and how they connected these flying crafts to the top of these buildings and use them as charging docks. And to be clear, I don't think that the past civilization was limited to just these airships that we have photos of. I think that they had much more powerful vehicles. But let's get back to these photos. Skeptics have said these buildings were just made of wood and very easily constructed, and then that's why they knocked them down. No, the only wood that was being used in this project is for the scaffolding to paint the old world buildings white. The lumber is for the scaffolding, not the actual building. Let's make that very clear. If you've ever gone to one of these buildings, the pillars are pure marble. They're not wood. You can use the Field Museum as an example, located in Chicago. And now here we have another incredible construction photo, where for some reason, there isn't much construction going on, just a building with more scaffolding. So my question is, how have they gotten away with this nonsense for so long? That is not construction. I can clearly see that the building is done. Just because someone put a ladder in front of it doesn't mean this is being constructed. This is the process that painters use. Any painter will confirm this. And also imagine carrying these materials up that scaffolding. If this was really a construction photo, it would be impossible and very embarrassing because nobody would be able to do it. Does anyone see a crane anywhere? No. Once you know, you know. You don't go back to believing in the lies because they are ridiculous. We have more tech in the background here. There are two of them actually. And here we have a bunch of people that found this building. Let's take a second and look at the size of this thing. This was the Palace of Electricity. Could you imagine this being constructed today? This thing is unbelievable. And remember, there were so many of these buildings being thrown together in like 2 years supposedly, at the same exact time. Oh, and they are all dated 1803, not 1903. And what happened to the Palace of Electricity? We were told that these buildings were practically worthless, and they ended up in dump sites because they were just made of wood, right? The problem with that is that they are contradicting themselves. The Missouri History Museum states that the construction for the Palace of Electricity and Machinery costed them $412,000, which is the equivalent to $11.48 million today in 2023. So it's practically worthless, or is it 11.4 million? This is the kind of stuff that makes me fully trust the mainstream narrative. I love just knowing deep down that they would never lie to us. It's just really nice to know. I love that they provide us with full logistical details. They never contradict themselves. They go that extra mile to make sure that what we are being told is exactly what happened. Oh, they don't do any of that? No, they don't do any of that. Literally none of it. The title states that this is the Iowa State Pavilion construction. And if you just shut your eyes right now, you can clearly see them right there laying the cornerstone. Okay, you can open your eyes now. This is the master builder down here. And those guys up there were also fully trained on how to build massive palaces. In fact, they are admittedly self-trained, getting a lot of their architecture designs and ideas from working on Abe Lincoln's house. As you can see, they were very busy workers. They got that building done in less than 2 years, ready for the world to see. Temporarily, of course, before knocking it down, so that nobody would ever see it again. And we can't forget to mention that they have painters actually painting this building. 4 of them to be exact. Proving again that these are not construction photos. They are painting photos. And over on the right-hand side of this photo, we can clearly see a construction process happening, putting the scaffolding together with perfection. Just look at that scaffolding architecture. Okay, I'll be done with the sarcasm for today. The mainstream narrative is so ridiculous. It's really hard to not make fun of it at this point. And then we have more painters. He's got his paintbrush in his hand and the paint right there on the scaffolding. so it's pretty clear at this point that these are no longer allowed to be considered construction photos for anyone that ever had a doubt in their mind. Now he's holding up a hat, and that hat says something on it. I wish I knew what it said. Comment below what you think that hat says. All answers are accepted. And here we have the United States Fisheries Building during its completion. But I'm going to zoom in on this building on the right-hand side because it's very strange. And we have these creatures' faces on the side of this building, with writing here as well. I can't see exactly what it says, but it definitely doesn't say Fisheries Building. And then we can see more painters up here on the left-hand side. And here we have a modern fisheries building. Built by us, of course, which won't last forever, unfortunately, because that's the way we construct things. So here we have a fisheries building that is designed by the Greek gods. And we are told that this is a separation of 100 years. But we are evolving and advancing, when in all honesty, that's the complete opposite. More and more people are realizing that the mainstream history that is written down by some random individual that was never even there and is being told what to write is a joke. Anyone that is seriously backing the regurgitated nonsense at this point and is serious about it should be very careful what they hope and believe in, because I have a lot more on the way that is going to rip their history books apart. So let's switch gears here for part 2. I want to show you all the Grimes County Courthouse, located in Anderson, Texas. And we'll just go right in on their website and can really understand how deep the lie goes and how many times it's happened and how these stories are a code, and in my opinion, written by the AI. And a clear giveaway is the repetition. The courthouse was supposedly designed by Glover and Company and completed in 1894, where it incorporates the east wall and foundations of an earlier courthouse that was, you guessed it, destroyed by a fire. So, we are all aware of what the fire narrative really means at this point. It is a nod to their group that this building is from the old world. There was never a fire here, and this building is the original building. The fires that happen today are real. You can see them. The fires are there to destroy the previous civilization's work. And they are not just fires. In my opinion, they are demolitions. Stone and brick do not burn down from a house fire. And this is common knowledge. The fire story today is to destroy these buildings, collect the insurance check, and there's nobody to blame, conveniently. Now, a fire story from the 1800s is weird, because they're trying to fit these incredible buildings into this insane timeline that they're trying to come up with. It's simply a nod, and we know this now. The amount of times that the fire narrative is given to us is alarming. Can you imagine every single house in your neighborhood going up in a fire? No, that's not possible. But nearly every single old world building has a fire story. The probability of that is 0%. So let's stay in Anderson County, Texas, where they have another courthouse that has a backstory that, in my opinion, wouldn't hold up in their own courthouse. Located at One Public Square in Palestine, Anderson County, Texas. This building was built on top of the highest hill in Palestine. And we all know when there is a big hill that something is most likely under the grass. We've shown this a lot. Episode 45 has an awesome example of this. Of course, we get the weirdest reoccurring names here, which we've shown a lot. How the AI can't come up with different names. It basically takes like 3 names and scrambles them. It's actually bizarre. It's very weird. Episode 43 is my favorite example of this with the Fredericks. But here we get the architects, Charles Henry Page and Louis Charles Page. So we get Charles Page and Louis Charles Page. That's fine, they can be brothers. But we know the reoccurring names at this point, and know that this is not an accident. And we know what's really going on here. The mom and dad didn't put Charles as the one kid's name, and Charles for the other kid's middle name. It's a clear mix-up by the AI. And then calling them brothers. And to drive this home, if you're on the fence, this is the 4th courthouse on this site. And this one was thrown together by the Charles Page twins in less than a year, over 110 years ago, from 1913 to 1914. Still trusting the narrative? Or should we go deeper? The first Anderson County Courthouse, a 1-story frame structure, was built in 1847. It was replaced, supposedly, 9 years later. And this type of thing was simple in the 1800s. Building courthouses back then with a horse and a wagon with no power tools was simple stuff. It was very easy. So a 3rd courthouse, also brick, was completed in 1886, only 30 years later. but you guessed it, was, of course, destroyed by a fire in 1913. We're clearly at the point where we are proving time and time again that we have been told a massive lie and that none of the mainstream history is or ever has been telling the truth. Again, using facts and real logistics and common sense, this fire supposedly happens in 1913. This is what they're telling us. And then somehow clean this brick building up, get it out of the way, get all of the new materials to the site, and knock this new courthouse out in less than a year. And it's here forever. This is insane to believe at this point. That isn't even close to a real timeline. And we're not done with Texas today. Let's go over to the Fort Bend County Courthouse and see what they have going on over there. Since, of course, we have these very real twin Charles Page brothers, pinned as the architects of that one too. A brick, classical revival style masterpiece that also stands the test of time. And if you thought that last one was an eye-opener, hold on to your seats, because this is the 5th courthouse in this county, which began in 1837. The structure was designed by these Page twins and all wrapped up in 1909. So from 1908 to 1909, less than a year, they got this thing done. And that's, of course, not the weirdest part, because, of course, there is more. Because we need to figure out why there's been 5 courthouses here in this town. So the 1887 courthouse, one of the 5 that were here prior, had a clock tower, but they removed that shortly after the building was done, which makes sense if you're trying to hide the past civilization's work. This courthouse stood on Morton Street, where the current town hall sits, and you guessed it again, it burned down in 1930. Did you think that was where I was going to stop? Well, here on TexasCourthouses.com, I found all 5 of these supposed previous courthouses, and I want to know where they all went. Not just one of them. The first one, in 1842, gone, lost to erosion. Here's the second one. Building completion date, 1871. Present status, gone, burned down in 1887. So we know that this exact same courthouse has multiple fire stories, because we already know that courthouse number 3, built in 1887, also burned down in 1930 from a fire. Oh, and remember when we were told that the clock tower was removed shortly after the building was done? Well, now we're being told that it was conveniently blown away in the wind. Come on, narrator, get your story straight. Oh, and just for fun, courthouse number 2 was $7,500. So courthouse number 4, just throw another 0 on the end of the same exact repeating number of 75. Unbelievable stuff. Between building projects that take less than a year, over and over, to the same names, and all of the old world buildings, somehow, randomly, without any backstory as to how it happened, going up in flames. Brick buildings, when we know that brick does not burn down from house fires. This is a lie, and has been right in our faces. And all we had to do was look. It is incredible. And I have found their supposed backstory. And not only are they from St. Louis, a place that we have gone to, and we know how incredible that place is now, but their father has the same name of Charles Henry, and the mother's name is Page. All 4 characters sharing the same name, where his father was a mason, with his brother being named Louis, and another duplicate name, hinting at the city of St. Louis. It's a code, a clear connection, reoccurring names over and over again. A code for only their group to understand. Until now. I was reading about the main temple at the Karnak Sun Temple. This place is 26.2 square miles, so I'm just going to be specific about the main temple. This is located in Odisha, India. What I want to share about it has to do with the construction. Structures that were supposedly built in the 1900s, we struggle to find the individuals that constructed them. But when it comes to the year 1250, about 773 years ago, they know exactly who did it. They got their birth certificates ready to roll, photo ID, they got their social security cards and their DNA sample. Of course I'm exaggerating, but seriously, they got it down. They know exactly who did it. They say this was sponsored by the king, so he paid for it. And the construction was overseen by Shiva. So next time they try and get away with not telling us who constructed an 1800s or a 1900s building, We can refer right back to this as proof that they can provide a builder, and they had plenty of resources to do so 600 years later. Who knows how old this place really is? It could be 5,000 years old, and I wouldn't be shocked at all. In present day, this seems like it's your local adult playground. Everyone's just climbing around on it. We have wheels that seem to be melted onto the side of this thing. The detail is unbelievable, all around the place. For this to be constructed 773 years ago, it proves that construction wasn't just trash, and now it's just incredible. Let's make sure that's very clear. We have not evolved in terms of construction. A previous civilization with incredible technology was here. A worldwide civilization that left their buildings behind. What are these sections of modern-day brick covering up? They don't fit in. They're all over the place. You can easily see the difference between the old world and our world. Here we have more climbers. The stairs are right next to this man. Not in the mood for the stairs that day, I guess. Now, if we go a little more to our right, we're gonna see 5 more wheels. And this is just your standard construction work, especially in the year 1250. They really enjoyed making fake wheels on the side of buildings. What are we talking about? Who are we kidding? This is not a random wheel that they chiseled into the side of the building. This, in my opinion, was an actual wheel that has been petrified into a rock. The entire structure here may have been the same material. Once petrified, it looks like this. And this thing right over here can serve as proof. This was not one huge piece of stone that was carried here in 1250. This was carved and turned into this material. There's plenty of proof of this. Many times people have opened these things up and they find that it's wood. Now, I'm not ruling out that this is stone and that these people had the technology to somehow bring this huge piece of stone here and then carve it perfectly and it stays here forever until the end of time, which is the opposite of the way we build anything 773 years later. But after everything I have researched, I would side with the petrified wood as the answer for this, especially because there are wheels right next to it. And wheels are normally not stone or brick. That wouldn't be the number one choice of material when you're this technologically advanced. If we go around the corner, you're gonna see that there are even more wheels. They go all around this thing. And check these things out. They were clearly placed on that spot. They even have a pin through that spot to hold them there, meaning they were able to come off at one point. If you zoom in on this place, it's just unbelievable. The amount of detail that is in it is just mind-blowing. It goes all the way around this thing. There's no chance that this was stone when it was constructed, if you believe the mainstream narrative. Chiseling stone like this in the year 1250, it's impossible if you believe the mainstream narrative, that we evolve and advance. Or else we would easily be able to do this almost 800 years later. They had it figured out and had it down. It was no problem at all. All they needed was a king to sponsor it. And any one of the 1,250 people would get the job done. Here we turn the corner and it looks like we've caught someone doing something they shouldn't. Up to no good. Let's go a little further. And more wheels, of course. A bunch of people that have no idea what they're on top of. Just climbing away, having a big party and celebrating something. Now, are we sure we're told the truth about our history? Are we 100% sure? Of course not. In fact, I'm 100% sure it's all nonsense. What is happening here in Mesa Verde National Park, Colorado? This is just an average mountain that for some reason has things that look exactly like houses and buildings with windows in them and has stairs all over the place, which is totally normal. Oh, no, it's not normal? No, it's not normal. These are clearly structures with windows and stairs. Who was living there? And where did these people go? And which construction company did these people use? Who was the architect? We can be given the names of the construction leader for a 1250 story, but not this? Of course not this. Because it's in Colorado and not India. If we were given a construction worker's name for this one, the entire narrative would be tossed in the trash, right where it belongs at this point. So instead, it's just a mountain, and we don't like to talk about it, okay? Now the mainstream says these are ancestral pueblos. I'm not trying to offend anyone, I'm just sharing my opinion. These are not pueblos, in my personal opinion. You can believe it if you'd like to. But these are from a past civilization and were most likely way bigger than this. I would not be shocked at all if they were destroyed on purpose. Would you? And we have more mountain climbers. Oh, those are built in North America? Yeah, so those are built by the ancestors. Not working anymore. You can't give us answers in India and then act like you don't know anything in North America. It doesn't work like that. So I've been having a lot of fun looking at some ancient stuff today, but let's go over to something that is actually here today and still in operation. The Alcazar Hotel, located in St. Augustine, Florida. This was constructed in 1887, they tell us. Now, this is located in St. Johns County, and if we take a look at the population for the entire county in 1887, not just St. Augustine, the population for the whole county was only 8,000 people. Why in the world did they need a hotel like this? This place was, and still is, massive. Home to a 3-story ballroom and the world's largest indoor swimming pool. What in the world is going on here? This is now a museum and added to the National Register of Historic Places. The problem with all this is that it's constructed like 40 feet away from Flagler College. And Flagler College looks the exact same. And as I promised in the past, here we have yet another college that seems to have found and repurposed old world buildings. Right next to all of this, there is the Memorial Presbyterian Church. And this church has Italian marble floors. The dome was supposedly brought over from Italy. Now they say that all of this, the entire area, every building, every church, was constructed by one guy. His name was Henry Flagler, and he dished out the cash and got all of these constructed, no problem at all, in the 1800s, of course. This took 50 years to build, which seems normal. Wait, no, what is this? This took 5 years to build? Are you kidding me? In 1825? This just got thrown together in 5 years. 200 years ago, I guess that was just simple construction, just chiseling away at that Italian marble. No need to mention any construction company or master builders for this one, because anyone could do it in 1825. This was simple stuff back then, easy. But in the year 1250, we were given Shiva and all of his personal records. They knew all about that construction process, of course. Does that make sense? No, that does not make sense. That they would know all about the 1250 story, but no information on a construction company in 1825. And have you seen this basilica? Built 1,000 years earlier, in the year 825. Still standing strong today. St. Mark's Basilica, constructed in 7 years. Thank you all for your support, and I hope you all have a great day. I will be back very soon with much more. See ya.